Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus. The International Red Cross bears the stain of disgrace of not helping the victims in the Nazi camps during World War II. I discussed this with Henriette Haas, who is a retired professor of criminology and forensic psychology in Switzerland. She taught at the University of Lausanne and the University of Zurich. She has served as the vice president of the advisory committee in matters of homeland and internal security for the Swiss federal government, and she's an active member of the Network for Academic Freedom, an international network of scholars who speak up for intellectual pluralism in academia. And she investigates flawed research, such as the ignored history of anti-Semitic influences in the International Red Cross during World War II. Henriette, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Henriette, I would like to start with a personal observation. My mother was deported by the Nazis to the concentration camp Bergen-Belsen during the Holocaust. And she always told me when I was a child that the Red Cross did nothing for the Jews and others in the concentration camps. I heard the same bitterness from most Holocaust survivors around me when I grew up. Can you comment on that?
Yes, it was indeed so. Only at the end of the Third Reich, a fraction of survivors received some help. Most of them did not. And it is hard to imagine the complete utter loneliness, the despair felt by all those victims of the Shoah. A trauma that just cannot heal.
Right.
And now we witness an unbearable revival of this cruel abandon of the Jewish fellow citizens in the face of serious threats to erase Israel and to defame and murder Jews wherever they are visible. The failure to speak up and to take political, legal, financial, and military action against Iran and its terror proxies and their Western supporters weighs hard. That's why we need to talk about the bystander mistakes made during the Hitler regime and the failure of some progressive historians to investigate them. Those mistakes are repeated time and again. Currently, they fuel the collective delusion of antisemitism by the very instances that should keep them at bay, namely the United Nations, the humanitarians, and last but not least, the higher education system, which promotes the so-called French theory, the umbrella of flawed methodology with which post-colonial ideology is constructed.
Yeah. So, is it true that the International Red Cross knew at the time which atrocities were going on in the Nazi concentration camps, that there was a genocide going on in the concentration camps, but that the Red Cross chose to stay silent about it and not try to help the victims?
Yes, it's the sad truth. Between August 1942 and January 43, the International Committee of the Red Cross and the Swiss government learned about the deportations, about the genocidal Wannsee plan called the Final Solution, the mass killings, and the gas. There had been rumors and partial evidence before. Until that time, the International Red Cross statutes only foresaw to help the soldiers. Their mission, anno 1939, very modest infrastructure, did not include providing any help to the so-called civilians. In October 1942, the Assembly discussed an appeal to treat interned civilians correctly, just like prisoners of war, and to allow them to get relief. But then they decided against it and to refrain from such an appeal unanimously. But there is a long story behind this dark day, because some humanitarians did want to help, but their efforts were thwarted. So I need to make a preliminary remark before I get to the point. Any unspecific criticism of humanitarian help will backfire on those who act in good faith and professionally, especially also on Israel, who is trying so hard to avoid civilian casualties, who has regularly provided medical help even to some of its worst enemies, and who has tried so hard since 1948 to find peace in living together with Palestinians inside and outside its borders. So when an attack like October 7, 2023 occurs with hostage taking, or the same is true for the concentration camps, aid workers, governments, and the media are pulled into an extortion scheme by those criminal psychopaths. Hostages or captives need immediate help, and this puts pressure on the aid providers. The urgency is exploited by the terrorists, then the Nazis, for information warfare and to extort financial resources. The Hamas terrorists and the Nazis made excessive demands, threatened to do more harm, deceived diplomats in every imaginable way, and they staged the scenes to create deceptive images for propaganda purposes. Whenever the truth about them is revealed, they take it out on the most vulnerable. They may start torturing or killing them, and then they blame the critics for the revenge, just like Iran does. This is asymmetric warfare. And asymmetric warfare, aid organizations' task, is one of the most difficult and risky endeavors that you can imagine. It's prone to fail quite often. And this must be kept in mind because we want to remain fair to those who give everything to help. They also exist and they are desperately needed.
So, if I may summarize to see if I understand you correctly, because it's quite complex what you're bringing forward here for me and probably also for many listeners who are not professionals on this matter. You're saying, first of all, you're saying, yes, it's true. The International Red Cross didn't help in spite of knowing, they knew between 1942 and 1943, they learned that there was a Holocaust going on. And they deliberately chose not to help the victims and to not even speak up about it, what was going on. And you say that is that they decided to only help military people who were who needed humanitarian aid, who were in the military, and that they decided not to help civilians, and that therefore they didn't help the Jews and other victims in the Nazi camps. You also explain that in general, and also that counted for the Red Cross during World War II, in general, there is, at the one hand, a lot of pressure on humanitarian aid organizations to provide aid. There's public pressure on them when there is a war going on, and that gets a lot of attention. or when there is something happening like October 7, there is a lot of pressure on these organizations to help and to show that they provide help. That's what the public expects from them. But at the other hand, there is a blackmail going on from the perpetrators who make the casualties, who create the victims, like Hamas on October 7, with the hostages after that, and with the Nazis during World War II. There is pressure coming, there's blackmail coming from these perpetrators that if they put attention to the atrocities, if they show the atrocities, if the Red Cross or the other aid organizations show to the public the atrocities that are going on, they won't get access anymore to help the victims. And that is under that it's under that blackmail that maybe also the Red Cross didn't help during World War II. Did I understand you correctly?
I think we'll really have to go into the details to understand.
Okay.
Obviously not understandable at the beginning. Let me just go into the details.
All right.
Actually, why is it that organized kindness all too often does not produce the desired long-term effect of transforming failed states like Gaza into democracies? On the contrary, what happens, aid can get perverted into a business of complicity with the dictators and the terrorists. So now what happens today must be seen as an evolution of previous epochs. We cannot, apply the same standards to the past as we now. Mm-hmm. Now, the pioneer years of the International Red Cross, the short ICRC, were during World War I. They had launched an appeal to ban chemical warfare, and they were successful. They were effective. The events of World War II then reveal a major flaw within the organization caused by this very success. Second, we have at the turn of the millennium the opportunity and the obligation to learn from history, but the relevant factors were ignored, even obscured. So an important lesson was not learned. And since then, the abuse of organizations from within has accelerated. So those combined aspects made me lose trust in humanitarian aid. And we don't know what exactly happened behind the scenes after 7 October, if the ICRC has tried honestly to help the hostages of the Hamas or not. I have my doubts here, but I don't know it. Because of the deep infiltration of the aid organizations today with political extremists pursuing an anti-Semitic agenda and with imposters whose goal is virtual signaling. The phenomenon of being infiltrated and dominated started in the 1930s, in the aftermath of the Red Cross's truly admirable accomplishment during World War I of banning poison gas. Then the abuse came with the fame. It explains why the very renowned committee under the President Max Huber from 1923 to 44 did not use its authority to help the victims of the Shoah. The problem continued after the war when they issued travel documents to major Nazi criminals escaping justice to South America and the Near East. Now, to address past mistakes is not to throw dirt on professional helpers, on diplomats, or on Switzerland. With its 160 years of existence, the International Committee of the Red Cross has the longest standing field experience among all aid organizations worldwide. Therefore, its history is of utmost importance. It's the major ethical obligation for historians to find out what happened and why. Only if we know the entire truth, we can hopefully develop new and more efficient strategies to deal with autocrats and terrorists. They are not easy at all. I'm not saying this is easy. Mm-hmm. So, my criticism of the research has to be divided into three parts. First, we have to address the events inside the Red Cross as we know them today. During World War II, the ICRC was aware that two of its members entertained exceptionally good relationships with Germany, including personal access to the highest ranking Nazi officials. So they had a chance to negotiate. Both of them joined in 1932. Both were charismatic. Both were professors at University of Zurich, my own university where I still belong. What happened was mainly caused by them. In 1942, worrying about the fate of the victims of the concentration camps, the four women members of the ICRC proposed to launch an appeal for the relief of interned civilians, also stating that those were often innocents in warfare. The appeal was entirely within their competence. It used a diplomatic and neutral wording according to the book. Interned civilians included also the 120,000 Japanese incarcerated in the US. This was not directly focusing on the Nazis. There was no public shaming. And then a survey was conducted among all the members in writing. One leading bureaucrat from Bern, Switzerland's capital, began disseminating doubt and fear inside the federal administration. Nevertheless, a majority of the ICRC, including President Huber, were in favor of doing it. During the plenary debate, which took place in Geneva on October 14, 1942, a renowned specialist for disaster medicine by the name of Heinrich Zanker stood up and uttered his vehement opposition against this. With the support of a fellow MD, a surgeon, and the bureaucrat, the proposal was talked down as counterproductive, alienating both sides. At the end, it was rejected. And this Heinrich Zanker's act was not a coincidence. In 1939, he had received a doctorate honoris causa from University of Hamburg, and this was published in a major newspaper in Zurich. When I consulted the Hamburg archives, the file based on espionage stated that Zanker was a true friend of National Socialism before 1933 and after, and he was known as such among his Swiss colleagues. So people knew. As an alternative to the appeal, 1942 again, Vice President Burkhardt suggested to negotiate with the Nazis discreetly behind closed door. This is also an alternative. Zanker tried to obstruct even this effort, but the majority dismissed him and voted for Burkhardt's option. Shortly after the assembly, this opportunity presented itself when Burkhardt received an invitation from Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer of the SS. Despite knowing Hitler's determination to make the Reich quote unquote free of Jews, by the end of the same year, Burkhardt just let it slip. He did not attend and he did not delegate anyone else. By December of 1942, the ICRC was informed about the mass killing of 60,000 Jewish victims. In January 1943, they learned about the gas. In the summer of 1943, they began sending packages to the concentration camps, and they had established a list of names of which they had become aware. They had found only 90,000, which is a tiny fraction. To explain your mother's fate. A new opportunity to intervene came up in November of 1944 1943. Burckhardt met Joachim von Ribbentrop, the Reichsminister of Foreign Affairs in Berlin, on behalf of another issue. And once again, Burckhardt failed, or rather refused, to address the destiny of the deported and interned civilians. It was against what had been decided. This was no coincidence either. Professor Burckhardt had visited the concentration camp of Dachau, 1935, where he let himself be fooled by a charade. He officially lauded the commander of Dachau for his, I quote, discipline and decency. On a diplomatic mission a year later, Burckhardt had praised the joyful spirit of cooperation which manifests itself everywhere, quote unquote, in a personal letter to Adolf Hitler. Finally, to go back to history, after D-Day in summer of 44, the ICRC started to act with more determination because reports came in attesting atrocious conditions and the threat to assassinate the entire Jewish population under the Axis powers. And yet, the full dimension of those crimes remained unfathomable until the end of the war, even for the Allied forces. So this is the history as we know it now, not
So,
what we
yeah.
knew in 2002 or so.
Henriette, if I may try to summarize, there were
We
people
have
in
a lot to cover, huh?
yeah
So
there were
fast.
people in the Red Cross during World War II, during the Holocaust, 1942, 1943, who wanted to give more help than only to the military victims. They wanted to help civilian victims, including people who were interned in Nazi concentration camps, people who were interned in American concentration camps for Japanese
Yeah,
um, Americans. So, and then but the committee decided not to do it under the influence of two people who were Nazi sympathizers. Is that correct?
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And these Nazi sympathizers also spoke with the Nazi leadership in Germany.
The vice president did,
Yeah,
but he
and
did not address the issue,
did not
contrary to the
address
plan.
did just ignore
What was
help
decided? They
and
ignored what was decided.
and it was decided
Yeah,
to
to
help the people in the
negotiate
concentration camps.
discreetly, but he didn't do it.
Okay, so this Nazi sympathizer in the highest ranks of the
Red Cross.
International Red Cross, the ICRC, he sabotaged the decision of the Red
Exactly.
Cross
That's
to
now
this
let's go
to
on.
negotiate with the
Yeah,
Nazi leadership
yeah,
to get help to the people in the concentration camps. And you
exactly.
say that is probably why my mother did not receive any help from the International Red Cross, and so many other Jews didn't.
Why so little was done?
Yeah,
If everybody could have been helped, I doubt it, because the disaster was just so big, incredible.
yes,
But more could have been helped, I think.
yes,
So now we need to talk about what happened after, because a lot of evidence came up after, and it's very important evidence.
yes. Go ahead.
Following the accusations of 1990s, you remember them maybe by Senator Alphonse D'Amato concerning Jewish asset in dormant in Swiss bank account.
Yes,
Remember the scandal?
yes,
An international commission of historical experts was mandated to examine Swiss history during World War II. and they attributed the entire blame for the Red Cross's failures to reasons of state combined with xenophobia and an opportunistic attitude in the population. The heartless decision of
Wait,
not
wait, sorry, Henriette. I have to intervene a moment for technical reasons. There, sometimes your sound is muffled. Is there maybe something over your microphone?
it's the paper.
Okay, if you could keep your
Thanks for
microphone
telling
free,
me.
please. Yeah.
Thanks for telling me.
Okay.
Maybe
So,
I'll put on the light because it's getting darker.
all right,
Just
go
a
ahead.
sec. Slam. The cat also wants to intervene, unfortunately. Just a second. So, so
Okay. So please
yeah.
go forward.
Now, following those oh, the lamp. The lamp fell. That's it's my first time.
Okay.
Excuse me. So this commission attributed everything to state reason and to the opportunistic attitude of the population. And they thought that the decision was probably been orchestrated by the elected government official Philipp Etter, a Catholic conservative, and also his bureaucrat. And those were indeed factors related to the low point of Swiss history. But they are only part of the picture. Because what we all know from the COVID pandemic is that governments heavily rely on professors as expert advisors in times of crisis. There's almost an inversion of power and authority, and this was the same during World War II. The federal archives in Bern are full of correspondence and meetings between and government and the academic advisors during World War II. For instance, with the aforementioned Heinrich Zanker. So it is unexplainable that the Commission of Historians of all people should not be aware of this.
So the Commission of Historians did investigation into the
Did
Red
not
Cross.
investigate into the experts, into the professors. Let me tell you, it'll all unfold. It'll
Okay.
all unfold.
All
Let me
right.
assure you.
Okay.
In addition to that, it was known since the 1990s, and it was on the radar of the Commission, that Vice President Burkhardt had actually been an imposter. Burkhardt, as a history professor, had fabricated legends about himself and pretended to have accomplished good deeds in the spirit of the Good Samaritan when he had done the very opposite. So he was an imposter.
He was the vice president of the Red
And was
Cross.
the vice president, and he was an imposter, a liar, a habitual liar. And one of their own sub-reports, the History Commission was also aware that Professor Heinrich Zanker was living in a comradely spirit with the chiefs of the SS and the Gestapo. He wanted to invite them to Switzerland at the end of 1943, just an ideal propaganda platform for the falling Third Reich. The evidence about Zanker's and Burkhardt's unacceptable behavior sends out a shrill alarm signal to every historian in his right mind, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
In charge for following up on the sub-report with the Zanker episode, the Burkhardt, I don't know who is responsible for that, but the Zanker episode I know. It was one single expert, a Zurich history professor and outspoken progressive. His name is Jakob Danner, and he is well-known and influential public figure here. he advocates also the frivolous French theory recipes so as not to sacrifice free fabulation on the altar of facts. His words. I have no idea what happened inside the historical commission, except that its research director, a specialist for Jewish history, left early in 1999 or was asked to resign. It is obscure. The final report in 2002, this is the title.
Can you read the title?
Where is
National, no, not everybody is watching.
uh,
Most people are
yeah,
listening.
you can watch it or load it down maybe later.
What's it called? National Socialism?
Yeah, National Socialism and the Second World War.
Okay.
Um, so the evidence sends out a shrill alarm signal. And I have no idea what happened, but the research director left early in 1999, or he was asked to resign. It's obscure.
Mm-hmm.
It's bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final report of 2002 buries the role of experts in times of crisis. Their reasons of state explanation is based on a formally comprehensive and partly outdated study from 1989. It lends credibility to the Commission for as long as you cannot see what the newer literature was on their radar. So, revealing half of the truth, the report glosses over the other half. There are only scarce mentions of Burckhardt and Zanker, and they mislead the readers into believing that they had been in favor of helping the Jews. Thus, the report is in contradiction to what results out of its own sources, had the evidence been pursued. So it fulfills its own official aim, which was to provide foundations that serve a rational discussion and a learning process oriented to transfer knowledge. This has not happened.
So, Henriette, the historical report about the role of the International Red Cross during the Holocaust, it omitted to report about the two Nazis in the highest ranks of the Red Cross.
Exactly. That
And
corrupted its mission. They corrupted its mission.
the committee did, the research committee
Those
did.
two individuals did. The experts were to blame mostly. The other reason also exists. You have to be just, you have to be fair.
Yeah.
It's not the only reason, but it's
No.
the most important
Yes.
reason because they were authorities.
So the historians around the
Blend
year two,
out what they
around the year
blend out.
2000, around the year 2000, they omitted to report about the Nazi infiltration, you could say, into the Red Cross, the Nazi influence, I should say, the
Yeah,
Red Cross that prevented the Red Cross from helping people
exactly.
in the Nazi concentration camps.
Exactly.
Why did Swiss researchers why did they not report on that?
Yeah, that's the great question. To be fair, I just have to be fair. They do correctly point out some problems about, for instance, the President Huber's economic entanglement with German industry, which had created a conflict of interest, but it was resolved by 41. But I find it peculiar when experts blend out the most mistakes made by fellow university professors. The common denominator between now and then is the unwillingness of professors to criticize fools, frauds, and firebrands within their own ranks. That's the problem. It reminds me more of a congregation of high priests
Mhm.
who, once ordained, are above all doubt.
Yeah.
In the long run, such an attitude of arrogance hollows out both philanthropy and academia. They become mere shells, providing employment and reputation with public finances, but without producing any benefit for mankind. It's the arrogance of experts. They don't want to, you know, see that not everything is resolved by their own profession. And especially, I think, also because Huber was, um, because Burckhardt was a historian. He was a historian.
Okay, so the historians of the 1990s and early 2000s didn't want to criticize
They do
historians,
it.
a historian in the
It's a
Red Cross.
hypothesis. I cannot prove it.
Okay,
I wasn't there.
all right.
This is just the hypothesis.
Okay.
So I can't prove it.
So we don't know why it was omitted by the research committee around the year 2000
Yeah,
that Nazi Red Cross leadership
yeah,
sabotaged the
yeah,
decision to help the Jews
yeah,
and the other people in the concentration camps. But we do know they did omit it.
exactly.
Okay. So, okay. Is there anything else you want to add about the Red Cross during World War II, or can we move on to a more to today? What's going
Yeah,
on? In,
soon. We just have to see another little thing which
yeah,
happened later, which is also bizarre.
yeah.
Because there was another episode to the historian's history, if you want so.
Hmm.
10 years later, a young unknown historian from Geneva corrects the misattribution of the ICRC's fault. She
Hmm.
focuses on the very year 1942. She points out the Red Cross had been quite independent from government representatives in their decisions. Uh, that this fact turns up in the files time and again, always. She also publishes the protocols. And then things began to go astray. And that's how I discovered them. Because in 2013 and 15, this Zurich professor, most deeply involved, perpetuates his and the commission's blunder in the media and with a book. And shortly after him, two new publications pop up. They pop up like this incidentally. Both come from Professor Tanner's own institute. And they both glorify Heinrich Zanker,
The
seeming
Nazi.
the Nazi friend, seemingly oblivious to his shady convictions and affiliations. So, by chance, I discovered one of them, a doctorate thesis, which is sort of a cookbook of French theory, realizing every rotten recipe contains a huge number of inconsistencies and mistakes. So, and he, offers another distorted narrative, diverting the attention of the readers away from the relevant facts.
Why did he do it?
Yeah,
That
that's the question.
you
He
don't know.
pays lip
Okay.
service to an against antisemitism, but attacks unjustly several courageous men and women who had helped the Jews during the Third War.
Yeah.
Reich. He blends out most Nazi sympathizers and presents some others by passing over the most solemn evidence. Same procedure as in 2002. And this guy was mentored by Professor Tanner,
Hmm.
received 2 awards for this afterwards.
Wow.
So, but those, we have to say, those historians, they are not so crude and dumb as to advocate anti-Zionism. That's not their thing. They
Hmm.
only associate and publish with colleagues from the vicinity of the false prophets, like Judith Butler, Achille Membe, Jean Ziegler, Mahmoud Mamdani. And they also try to involve renowned Jewish scholars before 2023 if they could. So they are ambivalent, they're constantly bowing to all sides, so that whatever the outcome of history will be, they will be on the right side of it. That is what, let's say, the character flaws that they criticize about Swiss mentality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a bit the option. It is to please everybody everywhere,
Okay.
you know.
So
But this is
to
my
summarize for
interpretation.
last
I
time,
haven't talked. They won't admit. I'm sure
no,
they won't admit that.
no. So to summarize for last time before we move on to a
Yeah,
next
but we can
topic.
go on now to what happens now.
Yes. So let me summarize one more time. The International Red Cross had Nazi sympathizers in its highest ranks during the Holocaust who prevented the Red Cross from helping the people in the concentration camps, as my mother also noted, who was in a concentration camp. And this was kind of omitted to report in the historical research about the International Red Cross during the 1990s and the early 2000s. And even later, around 2015, um, those who tried to, those historians who tried to correct this omission were also not received positively by their colleagues. Correct?
There was actually nobody who tried to correct. I
Oh,
did afterwards, but
oh
this young woman he did some parts. She's
yes,
aware
yes.
of everything, but she did to some point she did correct.
Okay,
But she doesn't receive much attention.
okay. Thank you. Then we go forward to today. Geneva is the humanitarian capital of the world. The International Red Cross is headquartered there. Can you mention some other important humanitarian organizations in Geneva?
Yeah, it's Doctors Without Borders, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International have all offices in Geneva, and they suffer from even more organizational pathologies than the ICRC. They are just shameless in their anti-Semitic propaganda.
And how is that a coincidence, or does everything influence each other there in Geneva in terms of
Well,
anti-Semitism?
Geneva is the cradle of international law. 12 states signed the Geneva Convention in 1864 to protect wounded soldiers. In 1920, the League of Nations was founded. This was the first organization whose mission was to maintain world peace, and this was replaced by the UN. And the ICRC is an asset to Switzerland. And it is meant to serve as a model for the international community. It should act as the guardian of humanitarian law. It should ensure the neutral aid delivery, promote legal standards that limit the brutality of armed conflict. And I wonder if they really enforce them. I am not sure, to be honest. I doubt it.
Mhm.
But, the the problem is that those organizations are infiltrated by extremists and imposters. It is just such an attractive business model for those. They are fatally attracted to such positions and they gain power because, they're not so easily recognizable. You know, when
As
you have
what?
a job interview, you won't recognize them. You have to go into the depth of their CVs in order to discover this. You cannot just, when judging by sympathy, you will never discover such a person. At the
Are
beginning,
you saying
they're
that
charismatic, they seem motivated, nice people, you know.
are you saying that terrorist sympathizers of terrorism against Israel are infiltrating humanitarian aid organizations in Geneva?
I think they do, yes. I think they do. They are attracted to the position. Obviously, they don't think of themselves as terrorist sympathizers. They have a distorted worldview. The problem is that these organizations are important employers for gullible graduates with little prospects of finding a permanent job.
Mm-hmm.
The ICRC alone has 2,500 positions reserved for Swiss.
Mm-hmm.
And humanitarian careers are recommended for those with degrees in history, sociology, anthropology, and the grievance studies who
Mm-hmm.
don't find jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them are now under the spell of the anti-Semitic post-colonial doctrine. This is taught in universities. It's the main doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And like Pied Pipers, radical professors groom students into becoming ardent believers of the woke doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
They stultify them even by demonizing logical reasoning. This was neoliberal epistemic violence to suppress the knowledges of indigenous peoples, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very woke.
it's the trend. There are so many people looking for work who have learned a, a profession that is not in demand. You know, even journalism, who was an employer, is declining.
Yeah. So you're saying the international aid organizations employ people who come from studies at university where there is woke indoctrination by professors, and that's what makes them anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, even in
Yeah,
how they in what they accuse Israel of, like
yeah,
genocide
yeah,
and right.
yeah. They come with this bias. They
Yes.
already enter with this bias.
Yeah.
When you have some of those people, they tend to chase away everybody else. They are not pleasant to be around with.
Okay. Yeah, they're
And then there's another factor.
intolerant of
Yeah,
pluralism.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? The international humanitarian aid.
exactly,
So they have a lot of influence.
exactly, exactly.
Could you also explain to us um, what the role, what is the importance of humanitarian aid organizations for in Geneva for Switzerland and vice versa? What is the importance of Switzerland for international aid organizations?
Well, it's sort of a hub. Another hub is Brussels and another is New York. There are three hubs, and Switzerland is one of them, especially Geneva. And it makes sense, you know, because of the meetings, etc., and the exchanges and the negotiations. But it also has become sort of a bubble, also because all the nations don't resist enough against the, for instance, interventions made by Iran. Um, it is just a huge bubble, um, who is never, you know, people who are never corrected. They are lawless zones. There are diplomats, who are, you know, out. They profit from immunity, and they can allow themselves whatever they want. They have immunity. They can go unpunished. They do whatever they want. And this creates an atmosphere where everybody thinks he can do what he wants, you know.
So, can you explain to us what the relationship is between international aid organizations and Swiss neutrality?
The aid organization, the ICRC, they are not part of the state. They have no status as a government office. They are not a government office,
No.
but they are, have a special status in Switzerland. And they are guaranteed immunity for their travels, just for their travels as delegates. It's a
But is
power in unity.
Swiss neutrality, like Swiss is not part of NATO, Swiss is not.
Yeah, it's part of, if you want, it's the um it's the reason why neutrality is a good thing to do. If there is an active and efficient organization to assume humanitarian help and to assume a place where diplomatic conversations can take place, then neutrality makes sense.
So
Yeah,
for Switzerland can base its neutrality on the fact that it has diplomatic, it's a diplomatic hub internationally, and that it is an international humanitarian aid hub.
exactly.
Okay,
It's an advantage. It's a
right.
something that they can offer, but they should assume it better, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, we have come to the end of this unusual discussion, I would say, for in the context of this podcast. First and foremost, because it's about Switzerland, which not often gets a lot of attention in this podcast. But Switzerland has so many interesting aspects in its role in the world and in its history. And I want to thank you, Henriette, for shedding light on a very important aspect of historical aspect of Switzerland. Not the most beautiful one, but nevertheless one that is in the mind of many listeners. Why did the International Red Cross not help the people in the concentration camps during World War II? And you shed light on that. And I want to thank you very much for sharing your vast knowledge on this and your important insights, and for all the work you're doing. I thank our listeners for tuning in to this program. If you want to learn more about this show, or if you want to listen to former episodes, go to the Never Again Is Now podcast channel on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or iHeart. And please speak up against anti Semitism whenever you come across it in the humanitarian area or elsewhere.
Thank you also for giving me the opportunity to present this to your audience.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.